Hey community, in today's podcast episode, we are talking about the history of tracks. Loop founder Matt McCoy sits down with the director of Loop Gospel, Otto Price, to talk about the history of multitracks in church, how they've seen them change over the years, how Otto was using them with DC Talk in the 90s. This is a really interesting episode. We hope you enjoy it.
What's up, everybody? My name is Matt McCoy. I'm the founder of Loop Community. Welcome to Loop Live. Today, I've got a really fun conversation that I'm looking forward to diving into, and it is with the new director of Loop Gospel, Otto Price. And Otto has, he's a legend. He's been in the music industry for a very long time, playing live music, producing music. And today, what I wanted to talk with Otto about was the history of tracks. And we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into what tracks looked like 20 years ago, 15 years ago. We'll kind of walk through how it's changed, because the way that worship leaders use tracks now is totally different than people were using them 20 years ago. And so we're going to talk about that. I'm really excited to ask some questions about that. Wherever you're watching from, if you've got questions, type them into the comments, and we might take a few live questions. So type them into the chat in YouTube or on Facebook, and we're going to take some live questions about the history of tracks. So let's go ahead and bring in Otto Price. Otto, what's up, man?
Hello. How you doing, sir?
Hey, man. So glad to have you on here again.
I love it.
So you are the one and only, what is it, Sugar Bear? Was that the Honey Bear? What was the nickname for you?
Well, the technical name was Sugar Bear, but you can call me Honey Bear, or you can call me Yogi Bear if you like.
And Yogi Bear. So for everybody who's watching this doesn't know, so Otto played bass guitar with DC Talk. His nickname was Sugar Bear. How did that nickname even come about?
Well, a little history on DC Talk. First of all, Toby Mac, as known as Tippy Mac, his legal name actually Kevin Michael McCann. So it's kind of ironic that the two other guys in the band were Kevin and Michael. So little fun fact.
Yeah.
So he was born in October, had the nickname, his brother said, when is Tober going to be born? And so he kind of went by Toby as a kid. So that became Toby Mac. So being that it was kind of a hip hop hybrid group, everybody had nicknames. And so at one point they were going to call me the Cat in the Hat, because I used to have this hat to wear. And so how the Sugar Bear thing came out, it was a joke, honestly, one night. They said, man, you play so sweet, man. It's like sugar. You're Sugar Bear. And then people erupted in applause. And then, if you know Toby, if he sees something that works one night, he'll try it again. If it works the second night, he continues to do it. So 10 years later, I'm Sugar Bear.
That's so awesome. So when did you start playing for DC Talk? Which, by the way, I'll start this by just saying that in the past couple weeks, I've done a whole deep dive into DC Talk. I've listened to every single DC Talk album now, multiple times. I've also watched a few YouTube documentaries that were I think they were indie documentaries that were put out. Right. I watched them. I've done a little bit of a deep dive. When in that DC Talk timeline did you start playing?
Yeah, so there were, five albums. So I came in on album 2. The first one was Heaven Bound. Second one was New Thing. I came in on that record. I knew the end of that record. Then Free at Last, Jesus Freak, and Supernatural. So I came in on the end of New Thing, and then toured that a little bit, and then we did Free at Last, and the rest is history.
So you played Free at Last?
Mm-hmm.
And did you do the tours and stuff for that? Did you play the Creation Fest where they came in on a helicopter?
Yeah, the helicopter, yeah.
Dude, that is so epic. And I've tried everywhere to find footage of that, because I just feel like that's so epic, and I can't find it anywhere. But I will say that of all the albums, I thought my favorite was Supernatural. And after I've listened now to every single one multiple times, I think my favorite album is Free at Last. It is just such an epic album. So many good songs in there. So tell me about let's start in the beginning. The Free at Last days, I guess, or a New Thing even. You could talk about a New Thing. Were you guys using tracks then? Were bands using tracks? Or was everybody just not playing to a click? Like, tell us what that looked like.
Yeah, that was. It feels like the dark ages. We were first of all, everything was recorded. This is kind of even pre. This is definitely pre-Logic. There was no Ableton, nothing like that. Any recording that was happening was first of all, going back a little further. 2-inch tape was kind of the technology at the time, and you could do 24 tracks, and if you linked them up, you could get 48. And then there's a thing called an Atari that had 48 digital tracks, but it was tape. It was yeah, it was just tape. It was almost like an old school computer, and so
Yeah.
there was no hard drive. So you recorded everything on a Atari or I think the Synclavier or the I forget the other one. Yeah, Synclavier. So it's like
So
basically digital machines.
it was tape, but you could actually have separate stems, basically, or
Well,
outputs.
you had individual tracks, so you had up to 48 or 96 tracks of individual tracks recorded, and then so that's how you made a record. So once the record was done, you would go back in, and the mix engineer would real time from top to bottom create the stems, or we would call them really we just got elements of it. So we didn't do the drums. We would just get like the loops or maybe background vocals and some airy keyboard parts. And so when we were touring, I think the newest technology was out was the we couldn't take we pick the DAT machines, the ADATs. So they
Yeah.
had 8 tracks. So if you saw an ADAT machine, it looked like an ADAT looked like basically a VCR, like a VHS tape. Basically,
Yeah.
were high-end VHS tapes. So we took those out, and you would have maybe 16 tracks of that. And so 16 tracks of just the elements. So if you heard it in a rehearsal, it would just be like elements that didn't make sense. The band live filled in everything to make the record sound like the record.
And was there a click you were playing with?
Hmm.
There had to have been, right?
Yep.
Were there
So
vocal cues like saying verse 2, 3, 4, or was that not even a thing then?
it depended upon the song and it depended upon the producer. Typically, what would happen for us, there's something called SMPTE too. So SMPTE was they still use it in movies, but SMPTE is it's an acronym. I should look that up before. But SMPTE basically locks audio to tape. That's how they still make movies. So things are done frames. If you lose a frame, that's why things will get choppy in a movie. So there's 24-bit or 24 frames, 25 non-drop and drop. So SMPTE was basically to get um, to get everything to lock in. And so then you would once you would lock in the SMPTE, then the SMPTE would read into a machine like a MPC 60, and it would tell what temp it was going to be. So early on, before we brought tracks out, we would actually bring out MPC 60s, and the samples would be on there, and then we pull the song up, and when the SMPTE would drive, it would actually start playing the MPC 60, and the band would just play along. The good part was that you knew like it had to count off like 1, 2, 3, and just start playing. The bad part, you got lost. You're you're out of luck.
So the band
It's
is playing
definitely
to a
Wild West.
click, but how did you know when to start?
Um, Sometimes it would just be a click, literally like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and you just have to know the song.
And then
There
you
would be no
know the
cue.
arrangement.
You know the arrangement.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Now, was every song on its own ADAT tape, or was the whole set list on an ADAT?
Typically, what would happen at that time, and this lasted for about a year or so, everything was on an ADAT, and it would you'd play a song, you'd put your whole set list from top to bottom. So if you hit it, it was like a movie. So if you look at Logic or Ableton, there's this thing called linear nonlinear. So nonlinear means you can go from minute one in a second to minute 48. That's nonlinear. Linear means you have to go from top to bottom. You have to wait 48 minutes and just go and stop. So everything was linear. So what we probably have a 1 minute break, then start the song whenever in real time, and then after that's done, give it a couple seconds in the next song, and then start that. And then basically, you're recording the whole set list live to an ADAT tape. And when you hit record or you hit play, you're basically playing the whole. show from top to bottom.
But if you guys wanted to make, what if like one night you're like, hey, you know what? We're going to do Free at Last third instead of first.
Mm.
Then you couldn't make changes like that.
Mm-mm.
So it was basically like, here's the set list we're going to do for tour. We're going to do it this way every single night.
Exactly.
No changes.
And that works. So worship, and if you look at a pop band, that's the one big difference. Typically, worship kind of can get into that where it's pretty much locked and loaded.
Yeah.
But really, pop setting, there's no there's no variance from what you did in rehearsals. You rehearsed 2 weeks, and that was going to be the show for the next 60 shows.
Wow, super interesting. And who actually printed those ADAT tapes? Like when you guys said, "Hey, here's the songs we're going to do," who like put your set list together on the ADAT?
Myself and a guy named Jason Halbert, and so it just depended on who had time, or had access to. And so Jason was our keyboard player, and he would drive it. He was actually the one hitting record. So keyboard players typically were the ones driving these things.
Okay.
Jason now is the music director for Kelly Clark. And so Jason would hit. He would do that, or we would do together, and basically produce the live set. Yeah.
So okay, you've probably already answered this, but I just want to make sure I understand. The ADAT machine.
Mm-hmm.
What was the sound engineer, the front of house sound engineer, getting? Were they getting just one channel of all the tracks, or were they getting like multiple? Like here's the keys, and here's percussion, and here's synth.
That's a great question. Yeah, there was typically at the highest we would have 16 tracks, and so there would be SMPTE probably would be track 16 because SMPTE was a very unique sound, and because it was tape, it would sometimes bleed. And so you may have something on track 15. So you would want to be away from everything else in case there was a bleed over into the output. So we had SMPTE roll, and click was probably at 15.
Okay.
So SMPTE was at 16. So neither one of those would go in the house.
Yeah.
So click would go into our in-ears, and then usually tracks 1 through 2 were loops. 3 and 4 like guitars, or if we need some extra, because we usually have two guitar players. On the records, there's probably 8 guitar parts going, so we would just pull elements that we couldn't reproduce with 2 guitar players. Then there'd be keyboard, stereo, then ambient noise. So at the most we would be 16, but typically we were right around 12 tracks, including SMPTE and click.
Wow. And were you guys using SMPTE because you guys were also linking up with video?
Yes.
Like on the screens behind you?
Mm-hmm. That's the other reason. So with SMPTE, now you can look at Dante, like the Dante system. They do a lot of that. Everything's integrated, and Ableton can fire off video. Well, that was happening with SMPTE to keep everything tethered together.
When you guys started using this at like the new thing, Free at Last kind of era, which is what? Early 90s? 91,
Yep.
92?
Actually, Free at Last was 93 to came out in 94. So 93 to like 95. We toured that record.
So how advanced or new was this technology when you guys were using it? Or had people been using this kind of system for like 10 years already?
No, it was we were kind of
cutting edge.
Cutting it. Didn't realize we were doing it, but we were. So like I was telling my wife the other day, we were actually on tour in Europe and saw this new band come out, and they're called Backstreet Boys, and they were doing something similar, but they were playing to tapes and playing with CDs, not with the full band. So we were actually doing things that like Backstreet Boys weren't doing at that time.
Yeah. What about the band's monitors? Did you guys have in-ear monitors back then?
Mm-hmm. We did.
You did?
We did.
Wow.
And the company we worked with is Clare Brothers. They're out of Pennsylvania. And so it was really, it depended upon, depending on the setup. So we could only get 5 wireless packs. So I had a wireless pack. The 3 guys had a wireless pack. And then another with a
Yeah.
guitar player. But usually the drummer and the keyboard player were basically hardwired in.
Were they custom molds?
Hmm.
Okay. Wow. So have they, I guess what I was going to ask is like over the years, have you seen, has the in-ear monitor technology, the audio fidelity of it gotten like a lot better, or was it all about kind of the same? Has it always kind of been the same?
No, I don't know if I want to go into companies yet, but I have some favorites.
Yeah. Yeah.
but um, but I would tell you companies like 64 Audio.
Yeah.
It's a from what I had in the 90s to now, it's almost the difference of watching UHF TV on a color TV
Yeah.
versus ultra high definition. It's
Yeah.
that
Okay. Yeah.
radical of a difference.
So the
So
technology has advanced there.
well, yeah, and I
And you,
think when I first had my in-ears, I went to audiologists. So that's a lot of it. So the audiologists were the ones who were creating it. Now you have whole companies and corporations that work with audiologists, but they're also sound technicians.
wow. So there was a
So
sound
that makes sense. It was like the
engineer.
audiologists were more like for hearing aids. They were just trying
Yeah.
to give you something. So it wasn't like
Right.
sound fidelity. Yeah.
Yeah. I have no idea why, but for some reason I always think of when I picture like DC Talk playing in the 90s, I think, oh yeah, they probably weren't using in-ear monitors. They were just like they had floor wedges,
Yeah.
like, but you guys were on wireless in-ear packs then.
Hmm.
Probably a sound engineer off to the side stage, right? Doing your
Yep.
monitor mixes.
Yep.
You're like, hey, more bass.
Yep.
So, how were you controlling the tracks? Who was controlling them and how were they controlling them?
Yeah. So the tracks were they will go. We talk about we went to computers, but typically at that point we would either have either the keyboard player, and there was we also had it tethered to slave to. We had two identical machines, so we had somebody on site that would hit the record or hit the play button. So the keyboard player didn't have to worry about it. If it didn't happen, the keyboard player had accesses to it as well. But typically, it was somebody off site, like a sound engineer from Clay Brothers, hitting play. That was really
And they would just press play. And then
cool.
once they press play, you guys play your whole set. They never have to touch it again.
Press play, and because ADATs only had like 40 maybe a minute or an hour, we would do whatever versions of that 5 or 6 songs. Stop. Toby would talk, and whoever would talk, and then they'd take out and then put the next batch of songs we're going to do. So take out batch A, put batch B in, and then whenever he gives the cue, we
Oh,
hit play.
that was gonna be my next question. Is like if you've ever been to a concert before, people obviously know that like there's elements between songs
Hmm.
where Toby like talks or has, and it feels like it's probably not totally timed out, or was it? You know what I mean? Like, was it actually in the track? Like, here's like your talking space. You've got 30 seconds before the next song starts, or was it like just stop the ADAT, let him talk for however long he wants to talk, and then press play again?
A little bit of both. That's a great question, man. It's really Toby's pretty, especially in those settings, is very regulated. So he knew how long he was going to say. So if he knew he had a break, he would say, "Okay, how long would I need? A minute. Okay, great." And he would time it. And so we were within like five, really 4 to 5 seconds of always landing it. Like you could almost set your timer by when he started
So it was
talking.
programmed in to
Yeah.
the track.
The break, but Toby had a way to pace how he wanted to communicate. And
Yeah.
if things got long, he would like pull it back in. Like if somebody said something that was a bit of a distraction, he'd pull it back in and try to get us locked in time.
But while he's talking, though, you're not rolling the tape, right?
No,
Okay. So then he talks, and then you press play and start up again.
correct, correct.
Okay. Very interesting.
So
What
he
did you
going and
guys
then
even? Yeah, go ahead.
no, he'd sing a song and blah blah blah, and this is why we're a bunch of Jesus freaks or whatever. And then
Yeah.
we'd hit it. People would applaud. And you got like a couple seconds till the song starts.
Yeah, hit play and go.
Yep.
So I keep calling them tracks. What did you guys
Mm.
call them back then?
Tracks.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's where they were. Yeah.
Did you guys ever call them stems or multitracks or loops? It was always just tracks. Or was it playback? Like, were there any, what other words did you guys use to describe them?
Tracks were really what they were. We pulled them from the multitracks from a
Yeah.
record, so like little elements. We never really got into word stem.
Okay.
I started hearing that terminology really in the 2000s
Okay.
because stems became
Interesting.
like a more concentrated thing, but we really had elements of the tracks.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. So those are all the questions I can think of for that era.
Mhm.
Now I'm
Yeah,
curious, how did you see tracks advance or change after that? So now you're moving out of new thing, out of like 1993 into like, let's say Jesus Freak
yeah,
97, you
yeah.
know. How did track technology change?
Well, that was huge because then we went into DigiDesign, started to really get in there and start creating. So Pro Tools early on was really starting. It was now from tape to
Yeah,
hard drive, and so the
yeah,
joke I used to make was when you're recording a record back in the day, if it was off loop, the joke was, "Hey, tape don't lie." But now now it go, well, hard drive don't lie because now you're not recording on tape, you're recording on a hard. And so DigiDesign was doing that, and so then they created something that worked with ADATs, and so then you could run the ADAT through the through the DigiDesign system, and then the next tier was actually taking a computer down the road using actual get like a tower, like old school Mac with the tower with
yeah.
interfaces in it, and so that's when it really got it starts to
And you would run them from Pro Tools?
run them. Actually, we used the hardware from Pro Tools, but we were running Logic. Early eMagic was the company.
Yeah.
eMagic was the
Oh,
name.
wow. I remember that,
Yep.
eMagic.
Mm-hmm.
So you were using hardware from them, but you were running Logic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then were you at that time using any sort of MIDI controllers or no?
Yes. So
Still just
MIDI.
pressing play on the computer and rolling?
Yeah, you almost have to think. This sounds like you know, inventing the wheel, but it really, but in the mid '90s, MIDI was only 10 years old, roughly. So the idea
Wow.
of MIDI being a thing, we're only 10, 12 years in, because it's really the '80s when it started to
Yeah.
become, you could sync things up. So, like in '95, we're still on the front end of getting keyboards to lock in. So we didn't really do a lot of keyboards locking in yet. We would just play tracks, and a few times we would run MIDI with loops, and because they were sort of safe to run. And then once we started getting to Magic and they were really good with digital, we were like, okay, this actually changes everything for us. Now we can play live. If we need to stop or we get off, we can hit stop on the space bar and
Yep.
then queue up to the next section, and then one, two, three, and then hope you time it right, and then the band title locks in for
Yeah.
the first measure, and then or the next measure, and then start playing.
What was cool about going to Logic is that you were now able to also customize your set list, probably. You could probably make a
Correct.
change if you needed to. Like, hey, we need to tighten up those two songs. You
Yep.
could bring it all in.
hmm Cut out a verse, add a verse.
Yeah.
Um, Going to Jesus Freak era, I knew we we definitely extended songs. We started realizing, man, going right to the bridge, like on the record, it didn't give people a chance to really warm up. So then we added like 8 bar break that was just like to let them talk and then go into the bridge.
Yeah. That's cool. And do you remember how many outputs you were doing at that time with the eMagic hardware?
With the eMagic, yeah, 8. So we
8.
actually condensed it down.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
say you went from 16 to 8.
we went down and then we went back up. But originally we just want to start with 8 and see how we could roll with that. And then
Yeah.
pretty soon we got up to 24. It's a
Did you
lot.
guys find that Logic in that era was as reliable as the ADAT, or was the computer crashing and stuff? And you were like, maybe we should go back to ADAT.
Yeah, we had a few, but overall, pretty rock solid.
Okay. Were you running
I
a
mean,
redundant computer?
yes, we had a redundant computer. And this is also, you have to remember, I'm kind of doing a little bit of history in my head. I think Steve Jobs was gone at that time. I think he came back in the early 2000s or
Oh yeah, he had left for
he had
doing his
left.
thing next or something.
Exactly. And so because of that, Apple was an open platform. So you could buy not just you could get Apple like a computer that was made to run Apple software. So we had several machines like towers that were that, and then later on we started to bring in. We actually had the old uh, like Jelly Bean. Remember those colored iMacs?
Yeah.
We tried some of those
You
for a
used
little bit.
those to run
Yeah,
tracks?
yeah,
The iMac or like the which
yeah.
that's when Steve came back and he designed
That's
the
what came back.
iMac.
Yeah, but that's one of the Sonic Flow era. But with DC Talk, we were just running those towers, and we had PCI cards, and the
I'm
PCI
kind of
cards.
amazed that those computers could do
Yeah,
8 tracks, 16 tracks.
yeah, but that's all they had on it. We weren't. I mean, we didn't have any type of Excel, Microsoft Office.
Yeah,
It was just that software.
just tracks.
Hmm.
That is so wild.
Yeah.
Um, and that was Logic that you were using.
At the time, it was called eMagic, and then Logic was sort of a hybrid. But eMagic was a German company. They were based in Germany, and they basically created Logic, and then Logic later on uh, was bought out. Let Apple bought Logic. Yeah.
Was there a reason you guys did not use Pro Tools?
Um, it was more preference. I think Logic. This is me too.
Yeah.
Um, Pro Tools at the time felt more. I used it a lot for recording and editing, beat detection, live audio. But when I want to do programming, I went to Logic, and so it just felt more versatile and more musical for me.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually just looked up, just for fun, just a screenshot of what eMagic looked like.
Yeah,
And Apple bought it for $30 million.
yeah.
Um, super interesting. So then I wonder if they ended up just kind of shutting it down and then making Logic,
Mhm.
or they turned it into Logic or something.
Yeah, they turned it in, but it's basically the way it feels looks is still from the Magic platform.
Yeah. Wow, man. Super interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so then leaving Jesus Freak era, we're into what? Like early 2000s, like 2001, 2002. When did Supernatural come out?
Actually, Supernatural came out in '99,
Oh.
I believe. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Okay. I thought it was
yeah.
in the
Maybe
2000s.
no. So Jesus for '96,
Yeah.
Supernatural's like '98 and '99,
Okay.
and then
Were
went
you
to around
using
to about
eMagic
2001.
all the way? So in the end of DC Talk, were you guys using eMagic, or what were you guys using at
Logic,
that point? Okay.
Logic, and to this day, I think Dave White is his MD. I think he uses Logic still.
Still uses Logic for
So
playback.
use Logic. So they'll go between Logic. I think it uses Logic a lot. And so some people were using Cubase, some people were using Logic. I have a friend of mine, David Doss, was Rebecca St. James MD, and he was using Cubase. Logic was being used. So really, those are the primary. This is really them. And then Ableton really started to take off in 2002, 3,
Okay.
2004. And then
Would
that
you?
was, a lot of people use that a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that's probably when Ableton took off. Would you say that right now, still, most people are using Ableton Live, or are there people using Logic still for playback?
And my experience and what I've seen working in churches and also working with artists, I think in a church setting, then it's Ableton.
Yeah,
It feels like that's the because it gives you more versatility and more
yeah,
for changing key tempos, being able to flow, etc. Um, and the other, it's more for the old heads like Dave, who's just been in Logic. They use it. I think Frankenstein, Jeff Frankenstein from Newsboys. I think he uses something like it's like Logic, and he may have, but he has two machines running or three machines running actually.
3?
hmm
2
He's got a
redundant?
laptop, and he's got another one just in case, and he's got one off site that if both of those go down,
Wow.
because it's running not just music but video for Newsboys.
I wonder how often he's had to actually rely on maybe that third computer.
I hope never.
I bet very rarely. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's almost like an airplane, like the big jet commercial airliners like have redundant systems like times 3.
exactly.
And you never want to get to that third one, and they don't usually,
Never,
but
never.
that's why they're so safe. So that's interesting. And we don't need to talk about Ableton because I think everybody watching here knows Ableton. That's
Yep.
what my generation, at least, I've been using Ableton Live since 2002. It
Right.
was Ableton Live version 3, I think, at the time when I first started. So everybody on Loop Community knows what Ableton Live is, but I find it very interesting to hear what you guys were using before. I actually would not have guessed Logic. That's really interesting. So when you moved over so eventually you did some music with Sonic Flood, right?
Yep.
What were they using for tracks?
Yeah, so Logic.
Logic.
It isn't broke. Yeah. We did
Yeah.
a lot and it was really, really cumbersome, and because that's when we really started to push the not say push the envelope, but I think we could see what Logic was capable of. Realize it wasn't suited for the format because it's worship.
Yeah. Interesting. What do you think there's anything in the track world right now that's been a total game changer that you've seen in the past decade? Would it be Ableton Live? Do you think that has been the biggest shift?
I think that's as far as hardware or software. I would say
Either, actually, yeah.
I would say Ableton for sure, because with what now you can put it really elevates churches sonically to a commercially viable sound.
Yeah.
Because before you're pulling or you're making elements, but now you can, it's sonically going to sound like a record. And people when they come to churches, they're becoming accustomed to hearing, wow, this sounds like a concert.
Yeah. Did you guys eventually ever start using what we call as cues, where it's like verse 2, 3, 4, bridge 2, 3, 4? Did you guys ever eventually start doing that?
Yeah, we did that in DC Talk, and I'm probably went over this, but we did that in DC Talk with Jesus Freak.
Okay.
But we did cues. So
you did what?
We would create cues.
Yeah. So someone would record themselves in a microphone.
Yeah, literally. Or if we had a laptop in the hotel, we would okay, here's where the verse is. We usually was just for start up for a section, and then for sections that were extended that weren't like the record, we would go, don't go to the verse. Like it's almost like having a cue in there.
Yeah.
But typically that was rare because it was just starting the song, because we had an MD in the mic tell each other what's going on.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. I kind of was going to guess that it was always just the start of the song.
Yep.
Because you guys just knew the arrangements, you knew the songs like the back of your hand. And it's funny because churches now play through the entire song with every single section cued off.
Right.
Verse 2, 2, 3, 4, chorus 2, 3, 4, pre-chorus 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Which it's nice, but I wonder how many churches would be totally lost if all they had was the start cue. But a touring band is a different story. You're playing the same set list every night, over and over and over. It would get old hearing those cues constantly.
Well, I think the cues sometimes can be like, in the church, we call it the confidence monitor. I used to joke and call it the lack of confidence monitor.
Yeah.
Because you don't know the lyrics, learn the lyrics sometimes, and so you're hoping. So if the confidence monitor goes down, a worship leader would be lost. And so my whole thing, I think there's something to mentally learning the song and knowing it. So you don't really need the sections, but it's there as kind of a security blanket.
Okay, two questions that came to my mind.
Yes, sir.
This is not about tracks, but did you guys have confidence monitors like churches have now where they have lyrics up, on the bottom so that the worship
Yeah.
leader knows how to sing the lyric? Did you guys have lyrics at all anywhere?
Nope. Nope.
Totally
Hey,
memorized.
here's a true fact. We I was kind of shocked. We did a DC Talk did a reunion tour in 2017, a cruise, and the guys hadn't sung the songs in like 17 years, and they needed a confidence monitor for their own song. So that was the first time I've seen that. But in worship, when we did with Sonic Flood, Jeff Dio, it was all in his head.
Wow.
Yeah.
Totally memorized, yeah. Which,
And then we were getting into like, you know, we were doing spontaneous songs before there was a thing. So he would just create little things and we'd follow him. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So, not that I want to bust anybody here, but I'd
Yeah.
be curious, did you guys ever use vocal tracks? In the case of like, hey, voice is totally shot, we're just going to like
Yeah.
have the lead vocal track go.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
We probably should have.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. No, I think,
Or did you see any bands doing that? Was that like a thing or no?
um, I don't, in worship, I've seen it a few times with live pop groups for sure. And it's
Yeah.
kind of unnerving. Like, whoa, that's the lead vocal effects and everything, like the record. And so, yeah.
Yeah, just effects, background vocals maybe, or like
Yeah.
a gang vocal going like whoa, whoa,
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But not like
Uh,
the lead vocal.
so what you described basically of how people were using tracks at that time,
Yep.
would you say that that's kind of how most bands in that era were doing it? Like Audio Adrenaline,
Yeah.
Newsboys?
We probably were doing it a little bit more advanced because we had more going on. But
Yeah.
everybody was kind of doing like that, yeah.
Did you ever hear of churches using tracks at that time?
That's a great question. No.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend about this last night. There's this thing called the Brownsville Revival down in Florida. And before we did Flow Record, we went down there. And Lindo Cooley was the worship pastor, and these guys just played, and he had Chester Thompson drums. But there was an era I kind of miss with that. But the guys were just playing everything live. But what it didn't have is it was just really good playing jam band, but there was a lot of orchestration and production like we have now.
Yeah. Did you guys ever have people approach you asking for your tracks? Like maybe a cover band and they're wanting to do Jesus Freak. And they're like, hey,
Yeah,
could we actually like buy your stems or your tracks from you?
yeah. We did have it with DC Talk a few times. We did, but really with Sonic Flood, that's there wasn't. I wish there was a community then because
Yeah. Yeah.
we had a lot of people going, hey, because we would just make them and even I was serving in a church, and I had Jeff come and to lead worship, and we did "I Can Sing If You Love Forever,"
Yeah.
and I had to go back and find the loops I made and the string parts, and I was like, man, I wish I was just somewhere that I could just download my own music, but
Yeah.
because he wanted to sound like the record, and I was like, well,
Yeah.
I have to go look through computers that are
Oh
ancient.
my gosh. I have so many questions. But so okay, here's another one that popped in my head.
Yeah.
You guys are using Logic. I'm guessing that it was all just like one show in one session of Logic. Or
Yeah.
did you have individual songs in their own sessions saved as like different Logic files?
It was one. We had both, but typically with Sonic Flutter, with DC Talk, it was pretty much just top to bottom. Even though it was non-linear, we had it linear. We had little breaks, tempo changes, everything. So usually just one, like we call the Jesus Freak set, and from top to bottom, it was that.
Isn't it fun? Just like honestly, just thinking about it, I'm like, I love tracks.
Yeah.
I just think it's just so fun to be able to like program in all those kind of things. Like you throw a pad in here, like, hey, we're gonna do a speaking moment here. Let's just throw this like pad file in.
Exactly.
I just think tracks are so fun, and
They are.
Does it make you, just when you talk about this, I didn't even play for DC Talk, but just talking about it makes
Yeah,
me miss it.
it does, because
Does it
you
make you
realize
miss
how
it?
much. Yeah, you do. Yeah, because you realize, especially when you pull up the different samples, like you mentioned, "Free at Last." We did uh, "Love Is a Verb," and "Dunna," all these. "Take this monk for a ride,"
Oh
"Dunna," all this,
man. Yeah.
all these, all these kind of things. It was fun, and it just gives you a great. It's nostalgic, but it's like
Yeah.
music captures an era, captures emotion, all these things.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I love the beginning of Love is a Verb. The way it hits
yeah,
like so hard.
hmm
It's
hmm
like, oh man.
yeah.
That was such a good live song.
Oh, for sure, 100%.
Man.
And it's
Well,
so fun to play live.
I appreciate you sharing
Yes, sir.
your history, your story of tracks. If there's anything else you want to share, go for it. But I appreciate you answering all these questions because I've always been
Yeah,
curious, like how were tracks run back
yeah,
then? When I was a teenage kid coming to the DC talk shows, Acquire the Fire, or I remember going to like a
yeah,
tour. I think you guys were on Audio Adrenaline. I think Audio Adrenaline was with you guys at one
yep.
point.
The
Just
big
I've always
house.
wondered. Yeah, I've wondered how that stuff was all run. So thanks for sharing, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Good to
and
see you.
sometimes
Yeah.
back in the day, some people were even. I think Audio A did. They would run a CD sometimes, and so
Ooh,
with different
risky.
cues, which is really, and so a click in certain elements, like a shaker or something.
Yeah,
But
just a
yeah,
panned, like a very
hmm
simple track,
very
like
simple,
literally using panning, like click on the left, tracks on the right.
100%.
Wow.
Yep,
But if that CD gets scratched, you're in big trouble. It's
you're
like
in big trouble.
skipping to the next song. Yeah. Oh man. Well, Otto, great to see you, man. Thanks for taking the
You
time.
too.
It's always
Yes,
good to
sir.
connect with you. Yeah, we'll talk
Yes,
soon.
sir.
All right, you guys. That is the history of tracks, at least from Otto's perspective, which I think is really cool to hear how bands like DC Talk, Sonic Flood, were using tracks back then. And just always interesting to kind of hear how tracks have changed. Like when you think about how you're using tracks now at church, it's kind of shocking how much it's changed. It's a million times easier for sure to use tracks now than it has ever been. If there's ever been a time to use tracks, it's for sure been now because there's no excuse not to. It's just so simple. But it's just cool to know kind of where it all came from. So anyways, type down in the comments, what's your favorite thing that you heard today? What's the one thing that like stood out to you the most that you were maybe shocked by? Maybe even type down in the comments too, what were tracks like when you first started using tracks? What was your first experience using tracks? Did you use Ableton Live? Were you using Pro Tools, Logic, a CD, a tape cassette? Type it down in the comments. Love to hear from you. As always, thanks for being a part of the community. We'll see you next time. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Matt. Thanks so much for listening. Hey, let us know what you thought. Write down in the comments, wherever you're listening, watching from, what you thought. Make sure you send us a message. Subscribe to our channel, YouTube, Facebook, and stay tuned for more from Lip Community.